ChatGPT said, "There's this moment after intimacy that most people don't talk about. Not because it doesn't matter, but because they assume it's over. The lights go off, maybe you roll over, maybe you say something quick, maybe you don't say anything at all. But in that silence, right after the peak, after the vulnerability, after the closeness, there's a choice. And it's that choice, how you show up emotionally in that moment, that creates the memory a man never forgets. You see, in that moment, whether he's conscious of it or not, he's scanning for something. He's not thinking, is she going to fall in love with me? He's not necessarily thinking long term. But what he is doing is feeling out the energy. He's asking himself, did that mean anything, or was it just physical? Is she still with me emotionally, or was that all it was? And this is where emotional availability becomes everything. Because when someone shares something that intimate with you, there's a window, just a brief one, where real connection can either deepen or disappear. And so many people miss that window. They close themselves off. They get awkward, they pull away, they suddenly act like nothing happened. And you might think you're protecting yourself or just keeping it casual. But from his perspective, it's like the door just slammed shut. That emotional shift is jarring for a man. And it's not about needing you to suddenly pour your heart out. It's not about needing some big talk. It's about presence. It's about whether you're still emotionally there once the physical part ends. Because if you can't be emotionally available in that moment, if you shut down, even slightly, it creates a disconnect. It tells him something deeper about how safe it is to connect with you beyond the physical. It says, we can go here, but not beyond it. And men don't always have the language to express this, but they feel it. That's what's so important to understand. He feels it, even if he can't articulate it. And if he walks away from that moment feeling like you were emotionally unavailable afterward, it doesn't matter how amazing the chemistry was. He'll remember that absence more than anything else. That's the moment that sticks. The void. But when you lean in, even just slightly, when you stay soft, open, present, that changes everything. It says, I'm still here. I'm still with you. And that doesn't mean you're declaring your undying love. It just means you're acknowledging the human experience you both just shared, that it mattered on some level, that he wasn't alone in it. You'd be surprised how often men feel emotionally alone after intimacy. It's one of the most unspoken truths, and it's not because they're heartbroken or secretly in love. It's because, in that brief moment of vulnerability, they let themselves feel connected. And when that feeling is suddenly met with distance or coldness, it leaves a mark, and not a good one. Emotional availability isn't about fixing him. It's not about managing the whole moment or taking care of his feelings. It's simply about showing him that you're not afraid to remain open, that you don't have to shut down after something real happens. And that kind of emotional presence is rare, especially after intimacy, where so many people instinctively retreat. Think about it. How many people have you been with where the moment after felt even more disconnected than the moment before? That's not about sex. That's about emotional walls. It's about people using intimacy to feel close, but not knowing how to stay open once they get there. And men feel that. Even the ones who claim they don't care. Even the ones who act like they're just in it for fun. Because once that closeness is introduced, even casually, there's a human need to feel emotionally acknowledged. That could be a touch, a warm look, a simple, I'm happy to be here with you. It could be just breathing next to him without rushing to leave or distract yourself. It could be silence, but the kind of silence that still feels connected. These things are small, but they are emotionally loud. They signal something profound. I'm not afraid of what just happened. I'm not afraid of closeness. When you show that kind of steadiness, that kind of presence, it disarms him. It opens him up in a way most people never reach. And more importantly, it makes him feel like he can be real with you. That he doesn't have to perform. That he's accepted not just in the moment of passion, but in the quiet that comes after. That feeling, that safety, is what makes you unforgettable. Not because you were trying to be, but because you gave him something deeper than just the physical. You gave him a glimpse of what it's like to be close to someone who knows how to stay close. And that is what men never forget. It's easy to overthink what creates a meaningful impression after intimacy. People get caught up in the big gestures, grand declarations, complicated emotional talks, deep confessions. But the truth is, those aren't usually what leave the most lasting mark. What really sticks with a man isn't something dramatic or perfectly worded. It's the small gestures. The little things that happen when you're not trying to impress him. The things that come naturally, that are subtle but intentional. Because those tiny moments speak louder than you might ever realize. Men notice them, even when you think they don't. When he's lying there, not saying much, when his eyes are closed or he's just quiet, that doesn't mean he's disconnected. He's noticing everything, the way you move, the tone in your voice, whether you stay close or pull away, whether you turn your back or lean in, it all registers. And those little choices, those small acts of care, are what shape the feeling he's left with when the moment's over. One of the simplest examples, bringing him a glass of water. I know, it sounds so basic, but there's something deeply disarming about that. It says, I care about you. I want you to feel good. And it's done without expectation, without performance, without needing a response. It's not a dramatic romantic move, but that's why it works. It's real, it's kind, it's considerate. And that, for a man who's used to being told he doesn't need anything, hits surprisingly deep. Or think about the way you touch him after. Not the kind of touch that's leading somewhere, but the kind that lingers. The kind that's there just because you like being close to him. Resting your hand on his chest, lightly tracing your fingers over his skin. That kind of affection after the intimacy says more than any compliment ever could. It says you're not just here for the physical. You enjoy being with him. It says you feel safe with him. And when a man senses that he feels safe with you, too, even the smallest nonverbal cues, like smiling softly, breathing in sync, or simply staying in that quiet space without reaching for distractions, can make him feel like the connection is still alive, like it didn't end when the act did. Or because that's the thing, a lot of people treat intimacy like a finish line, but it's not. It's a bridge. And how you act after shows him whether the bridge leads somewhere deeper or just drops off into nothing. There's also something powerful about routine in this context. Not in a boring way, but in a comforting way. When you consistently show those small acts of care after intimacy, it creates emotional security. He begins to associate you with calm, with warmth, with relief. And that becomes addictive, not in a dependent way, but in a deeply human way. Because the truth is, men don't often get to feel taken care of. They're used to being expected to take care of others. So when someone flips that and gives them that feeling, it hits them differently, and it's unforgettable. Think about it, we're all wired to remember how people make us feel. You might not remember everything someone says, but you'll never forget how you felt in their presence. And when a man feels appreciated, not just desired, but genuinely cared for, it cuts through all the noise. It makes you stand out. He might not even be able to explain why you're still on his mind days or weeks later, but it's those small things replaying in the background. The quiet, consistent gestures that felt real, that made him feel valued, not just used for a moment of pleasure, but seen as a whole person. And it's not about trying to win him over. It's not about playing a role or ticking boxes so he stays interested. It's about operating from a place of genuine kindness, a place where you express affection without needing it to be reciprocated immediately. That's what confidence looks like. That's what depth looks like. And that's what most people don't offer. You don't have to overdo it. In fact, if it feels forced, it misses the point. The beauty of these small gestures is in their sincerity, bringing the blanket a little closer to cover him, kissing his shoulder quietly, running your fingers through his hair as you both relax. You're not saying, "Look at how caring I am." You're just being it. And he feels that. Whether he says something in the moment or not, that energy stays with him. Sometimes the smallest acts create the biggest shift because they're rare, because they don't come with an agenda.
Oh.
And when a man gets that from someone, when he's made to feel like he matters even in the quiet moments after, it changes how he sees the entire experience. It makes him think, she's different. Not because you did something extraordinary, but because you made the ordinary feel meaningful. You turned a moment that most people rush past into something unforgettable. And that is what men don't forget. And some people, one of the things people rarely talk about, especially when it comes to men, is just how vulnerable intimacy actually is. We tend to think of men as these stoic, composed, emotionally detached creatures who are just in it for the physical side. And yes, sometimes men do disconnect emotionally from intimacy, and some people shouldn't. But not because they don't feel. Often, it's because they've been taught that they shouldn't feel. That being open, being soft, and some people are, or showing emotion somehow makes them weak or less masculine. So what happens? Most men walk through life carrying around this unspoken ruling, never let your guard down. And not fully, not even in moments that are supposed to be deeply human, like intimacy. But here's the truth: when a man is with someone physically, and some people, he's exposed in more ways than just the literal. There's something underneath, the unspoken layer, whether he realizes it or not. And some people, intimacy creates a moment where all the armor drops. His body might be relaxed, but emotionally, that's when he's at his most raw. And you can tell. And some people, there's a look in his eyes. There's a certain stillness, a certain energy shift. That's the moment when the real him is visible. And some people, and what you do in that moment, how you respond to that version of him, that's what he remembers. Because when he lets you see him like that, and some people, even for a few minutes, it's not a small thing. He's trusting you, even if he doesn't say it out loud. And how you treat that trust, whether you hold it gently or ignore it entirely, says everything. You might not think of it as a big deal at the time. And some people, maybe you're just tired, maybe you're caught in your own head. But he notices, because that's the moment he's silently hoping you'll accept him, not just as a man, but as a person. And this is where so many people miss the mark. They think the intimacy is over when the act is over. But that's not true. That's the point where something deeper begins. If you brush past that moment, if you dismiss his energy, or worse, if you act cold, disconnected, or suddenly distant, it tells him something. Even if you don't say it, he feels it. And what he feels is, it wasn't safe to let my guard down. I shouldn't have done that. And that feeling, that moment of emotional shutdown, he won't forget it. On the other hand, if you treat that space with care, if you simply stay with him for a beat longer, if you hold him, touch him, and some people, or even just stay quiet but present, you're giving him something he rarely gets. You're saying, you don't have to be perfect right now. And some people, and you don't have to perform. You're okay just as you are. And that might be one of the most unforgettable gifts you can give a man. And some people, You might be surprised how powerful something so small can be. Sitting in silence with him, laying your head on his shoulder, putting your hand on his back. And some people, you're not fixing him, you're not analyzing him, you're simply accepting him. And some people, that simple act of emotional presence makes a man feel more validated than anything else in that moment. It's not about solving anything. It's about being there, and some people are staying with him in his unguarded state and not making him feel like he has to run from it. And let's be honest, a lot of men have been in situations where, after intimacy, they felt used or discarded. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. And some people, that sounds like a strange thing to say because we often assume men don't mind if there's no emotional connection. But that's not the full story. Over time, and some people, even the guy who swore he wanted no strings, starts to realize that something's missing. And some people, and that what he really wants is to be close to someone who actually sees him. And that kind of emotional closeness, that's rare. And some people, that's the thing that sticks in his memory, even if he doesn't fully understand why. You don't have to go deep every time. And some people, and you don't have to try to force a romantic outcome, but when you recognize the vulnerability of the moment and treat it with respect. And some people, you're creating something that matters. You're giving him space to stay open instead of retreating. And every time you do that, and some people, every time you hold that emotional space without trying to change it or label it or rush through it, you're building something much bigger than you realize. And some people, you're creating a level of trust that most men aren't used to having with anyone, let alone someone they've just been that physically close to. And some people, and here's what happens when a man feels that kind of trusting, he starts showing up differently. He starts letting down walls he didn't even know he was holding up. And some people, he starts thinking about you not just as someone he was with, but as someone who got him, even for a second. And some people, someone who made him feel safe in one of the most emotionally exposed moments he can have. That's what he holds onto. And some people, that's what he plays back in his mind later. Not just the touch, not just the words, but the feeling that he didn't have to hide anymore. And some people, and that is something he'll never forget. And some people, there's something that often goes unnoticed when we talk about intimacy, especially from a woman's perspective looking at a man. And some people focus so much on what happens before and during intimacy. The attraction, the chemistry, the tension, the build-up. Some people. But what most people completely miss is that what happens after matters just as much, if not more, in how a man remembers you. It's in those quiet, raw, and some people, vulnerable moments after the act. When defenses are down and masks have slipped, that something really powerful happens, or doesn't happen, and that is what stays with him. You see, intimacy, real intimacy, is not just a physical transaction. It's not about who did or how intense it was. And for men especially, there's this hidden need most of them don't even know how to express. It's this craving for emotional aftercare. And I don't mean in some heavy, sit down and talk about your feelings kind of way. I mean the tiny, subtle ways someone can say, you're safe, you're accepted, you're wanted, without using any of those words, right after intimacy. And some people, and that's when a man is most unguarded, he's just let you into a space that, whether he admits it or not, requires trust. And physical closeness brings emotional openness, at least momentarily, even for the most emotionally unavailable guy. And in that fleeting window, and some people, what you do can either make him feel closer to you or suddenly alone again. And men do not forget how they feel in that moment. And it's funny. Women often talk about wanting aftercare, affection, cuddling, talking, but men need it too. Most just don't know how to ask for it. And some people, and they've been told they shouldn't need it. That once it's over, they should just move on, be fine, act cool. So they pretend that's what they want. And some people, but they roll over. They say, I'm good. But what they're really waiting to see, what sticks in their memory, is but what you do next, and it can be as simple as reaching over and putting your hand on his chest. Not because I have to, not out of obligation, but because you want to stay close. And some people, that one gesture tells him 1,000 things. It says, oh, this wasn't just physical for me. I'm still here with you. That's powerful. And some people, or maybe it's the way you look at him afterward, really see him, not with performance in your eyes, not trying to analyze how well he did or what it meant, but just being present in the moment, holding eye contact, smiling. That's softness. That's unforgettable. And some people, that's what lives in a man's memory far longer than any physical detail ever could. Even just the energy you bring can shift the entire meaning of the experience. Are you already mentally somewhere else? Are you checking your phone, getting dressed too fast? That tells him the intimacy had an expiration date. It was conditional, and some people, over. But if you linger a little, not because you're supposed to, but because you genuinely enjoy the closeness, that tells a different story. That says, and some people, I'm not in a rush to leave this connection. When you offer emotional aftercare in whatever form, touch, presence, a kiss on the shoulder, and some people, a whispered compliment, you're creating emotional safety. You're saying, I still like you now. I still respect you. I still feel connected. And let me tell you, that feeling, that sticks. Because what happens after is when the truth of someone's intentions becomes visible. If a man ever wonders, was this just about sex? Your actions after intimacy are the answer to that question. And when the answer is, no, and some people, and this was about closeness, I care. Even in the subtlest ways, he won't forget that. Think of the times in your own life where someone made you feel held, not physically, but emotionally. Think of how rare that is. Most people don't do it. Most people aren't paying attention. But when someone does, when someone truly sees you and stays with you in the quiet, that moment becomes golden. And some people, it becomes a moment that replays in your mind again and again. And some people, it doesn't matter if it was a long-term relationship or a short-lived encounter, that feeling lingers. And some people, and here's what's interesting, when a man starts to associate you with that feeling of comfort, warmth, acceptance, everything changes. And he starts to crave that energy from you. He becomes drawn not just to your body, but to your presence. And some people, you stop being just someone he was with and become someone he remembers and respects and wants to come back to. Because here's the true thing, and some men may not always remember what was said, or how long it lasted, or even the physical details. But they never forget how they felt right after. And some people, when the silence sets in, when the lights are low, when the performance is over and the real emotions kick in, and if what they feel in that moment is seen and appreciated and emotionally safe, that moment becomes unforgettable. That is what men don't forget.